Crash and burn.
Hey everyone, so tonight, it's 8 o'clock. Tonight I am going to be discussing Panos Cosmatosin's first film, and that is Beyond the Black Rainbow. And I've been sort of obsessed with this movie since I saw it a number of years back. I'm sure I'm not the only person that became obsessed with this. That bee or wasp or whatever it was incredibly interested in the camera. Anyways, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's been completely obsessed with this movie. Panos Cosmatos has a way of sort of creating these sort of all-encompassing worlds that are very smothering, and he does it on a really small budget. And if I'm not mistaken, the budget for this film was, I think, a little over $1 million. So he has this sort of like Kubrick sense of scope and depth that he's able to sort of pull out of very limited resources, because despite the fact that this movie takes place in like essentially 2 or 3 places, the world that he's existed outside of this seems to find its way into the Arboria Institute, where Dr. Barry Nile is keeping Dr. Arboria's daughter, Elena, hostage because he's sort of in love with her, despite the fact that he's a freak because of what Arboria did to him. And, well, technically, Elena's a bit of a freak, too, because of what Arboria did to her after Barry came back from the black ooze and the hellish nightmare visions and coming back bald and with black eyes. Arboria dipped Elena into it as well, and I think that's why she is as telekinetic as she is. And so, like I said, despite the fact that this movie seems to have like almost like a claustrophobic sense of being walled in the Arboria Institute, the world outside of the walls of the Arboria Institute always seemed to sort of echo their way in, because it's like I've lived this, or I lived in that world that didn't know that the Arboria Institute existed, of course. I was like out somewhere doing something. I was like a little kid at this point. And, okay, that bird just jumped down out of nowhere and scared the hell out of me. I really need to seek counseling. Birds are freaking me out now. But there's something about the Arboria Institute, too. I mean, this is like the weirdest thing to try and wrap my head around. But despite the fact that I know that I've never been there, it's sort of like a place I've always been in, or a place that I've always longed to be in, because everything about it just resonates and everything seems so familiar. Despite how alien everything looks and how everything is set up very much in a lot of ways like Kubrick's 2001, there's something really inviting about this movie. And despite the fact that this movie is like the most technical example of a slow burn, it's not really narrative driven. It's not really all that narrative driven, sorry. The story doesn't unfold with any real great sense of purpose. And there's only a handful of characters in the entire film. I think there's Arboria, there's Nile, there's Elena, there's the nurse who's dressed like Teddy Ruxpin, and then there's Nile's wife, and then the 2 metalheads, or the Heshers, at the end, that he kills after he accuses them of sleeping with Elena. So yeah, the cast for this film is tight, and everything is it's very claustrophobic feeling. But I just love how Cosmatos managed to capture this early 1980s point where everything still had that sort of 1970s wood paneling everywhere, and how like Nile's wife's haircut could not be more 1983, right? And it's like the attention to detail in the smallest points, like at the end when Nile's pulling out the leather suit, it's from Noriega Leathers. Now, for anybody who doesn't know who General Manuel Noriega was, look him up. He was a big deal back in the 80s. I think he was working for the CIA the whole time, and then the CIA got sick of him running drug money for various drug dealers and whatnot, so they sent in the SEALs, and he, of course, knew some of their tricks, so he was able to fuck the SEALs up, and inevitably they got Noriega. But yeah, for anybody that cares, you can look up General Manuel Noriega and find out the sort of wink-wink moment at the end when Nile pulls out the Noriega leather suit that he had custom made, and that big-ass knife. I think what was it, the Devil's Teardrop, I think he called it. I don't know, as far as the story is concerned, the story is very simple. Niall is in love with Elena, who is his sort of mentor's Dr. Arboria's daughter. And I think, too, back in the 60s when Arboria sort of tossed Niall into that black shit that caused him to go crazy, he might have buried Niall at that point. I think A, was a completely different person. He seemed really sweet and really nice. He wasn't the psychopath that he is, that we're subjected to in this film. He seemed like a genuinely decent person, but I think at that point he was already in love with Arboria's wife, and if memory serves, her name was Anna. Oh yeah, that's right, she was in the movie too. That's right, so that's one more person I completely forgot about. So after he comes back and he's all sort of like wigged out and he doesn't have any hair anymore because he's seen this like nightmarish world, and instead of gaining transcendence, he gained psychosis, and then he kills Arboria's wife, Anna, and Arboria seems completely unfazed by this. He grabs Elena and dips her into the black shit, and that's why Elena has the powers that she has. So there's not a lot of good people in this place, because near the end, when Elena breaks free and she's attempting to sort of navigate her way through the labyrinth that is the Arboria Institute, she comes across another patient who's in this like sort of full bodysuit straitjacket, and their face is completely mangled and they look hideous, and they're less human and more like some kind of mindless piranha monster. And she has to sort of like creep past this thing. And so I wonder too if this place was decent when Arboria was running it, because despite the fact that he was a junkie, he did seem like maybe he was trying to bridge the gap between like spirituality and science, and he was attempting to have people find a genuine sense of happiness by combining the two. But now that Niall's taken it over, I don't even think there's very many patients anymore, so I'm not exactly sure how he's keeping the lights on. And where the hell did that come from? Where the hell did that come from? Somebody said hi, YouTube, and I don't know where they are. But yeah, so where was I? What was I saying before the person said hi, YouTube? I don't remember. Talking about how Arboria was probably a good person. And I do love how when Niall ODs Arboria, because Arboria isn't half the man that he used to be, Arboria is watching these like tourist videos of Hawaii, and it's funny because you would assume that Arboria had enough money to go to Hawaii whenever he wanted, but I imagine his crippling drug addiction kept him in this room while Niall took over and completely screwed up the Arboria Institute. Oh wow, this is pushing 8 minutes. Jesus Christ, I rambled a lot, and I shouldn't do these outside. It's too distracting. But yeah, so I will end it here. I absolutely love this movie. I love the atmosphere. I love how it feels like a fever dream. I love how completely psychotic Niall is. I love how he actually looks when he takes his wig and his eyes out. And I love how Elena manages to best him at the end so simply. And then when she goes walking off, it's like that early 1980s that a lot of us grew up in. So it's very familiar again. And then if you watch after the credits, there's the Sensionaut toy on a carpet, which does sort of suggest the idea that maybe none of this happened and it was all in a kid's head. The same thing could be argued for a second film, Mandy, considering how that movie ends and it shows the drawings of Nick Cage wearing her shirt and everything. It's really debatable if Mandy just created that whole story for the sake of like a graphic novel that she was working on. I really wonder if any of this happened, though. I have to say, with that Sensionaut toy being on the carpet in the like post-credits scene, it really makes me doubt the validity of this happening. So yeah, 9 minutes now. I'm gonna stop. So thank you so much for hanging out with me while I discussed Panos Cosmatos' first film, and that is Beyond the Black Rainbow. If you liked this review, like always, don't forget to do something nice for somebody, and if you made it this far, Jesus Christ, thank you. Have a good night. I just wanted to say thank you for making it through the entire video. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to remind everyone one more time, even though I've probably already done this in the video that you just watched, to please click the like button as well as the subscribe button, because it helps this channel grow. And thank you for hitting like and subscribe, and we will see you guys really soon.